Hey everybody, this is Jace for the Alliance Project. We're finishing up the Kybalion so we can get into some more Hermetic teachings in books read by Thoth that are suppressed and kept out of the public. So what I'm going to do is put them out there, and for those people that listen and watch my channel, please use this resource. Please read these, see the connections. You were all brought here because of Nibiru, right? Planet X, things like that, Thoth the Atlantean. So take the real teachings, the real stuff that is really written, connect the dots, and then we'll get into some deeper stuff. Please follow this. If you haven't watched the first two, please go back, take your time, and listen to them. I did them in chapters, sections, so people can listen to them and have a very easy time following and not having to listen for, hours and hours on end. I broke it down into 3 parts so far, and I think I'll be able to finish it in this time. So here we go. Chapter 11, the Divine Paradox. The half-wise, recognizing the comparative unreality of the universe, imagine that they may defy its laws. Such are vain and presumptuous fools, and they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. The truly wise, knowing the nature of the universe, use laws against laws, higher against lower, and by the art of alchemy transmute what is indesirable into which is worthy, and thus triumph. Mastery consists of not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings or living, but in using higher forces against lower, escaping the pains of lower planes by vibrating on higher. Transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. This is the paradox of the universe, resulting in the principle of polarity which manifests when the all begins to create. Hearken to it for the points in the difference between half-wisdom and wisdom. Within the infinite all, the universe, its laws, its powers, its life, its phenomena, are as things witnessed in the state of meditation or dream. Yet to all that is finite, the universe must be treated as real, and life, and action, and thought, and must be based thereupon accordingly, although with an ever-understanding of the higher truth, each according to its own plane and laws. Were the all to imagine that the universe were indeed reality, then woe to the universe, for there would be no escape from the lower to the higher, divinely. There would be a universe become a fixity, and a progress would become impossible. And if man, owning to half wisdom, acts and lives and thinks the universe is merely a dream, akin to his own finite dreams, then indeed does it become for him. And like a sleepwalker, he stumbles around in a circle, making no progress, and being forced into an awakening at last by his falling and bruised over, bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. Keep in your mind ever on the star, and let your eyes watch over your footsteps, lest you fall and mire by reason of your upward gaze. Remember the divine paradox, that while the universe is not, it still is. Remember ever the 2 poles of truth, the absolute and relative. Beware of half-truths. What Hermeticists know as the law of paradox is an aspect of principle of polarity. The Hermetic writings are filled with references to appearance of the paradox in consideration of the problems of life and being. The teachers are constantly warning their students against error of omitting the other side of any question. And their warnings are particularly directed to the problems of the absolute and relative, which perplex all students of philosophy, and which cause so many to think and act contrary to what is generally known as common sense. And we caution all students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox of the absolute and relative, lest they become entangled in a mire of half-truth. When this is in view, this particular lesson has been written. Read it carefully. First thought that comes to the thinking man after he realizes that that the universe is a mental creation of the all is that the universe and all that it contains is a mere illusion, an unreality, against which an idea his instincts revolt. But this, like all other great truths, must be considered both from the absolute and relative points of view. From an absolute viewpoint, of course, the universe is in the nature of an illusion, a dream, a phantasmagoria, as compared to the all itself. We recognize this even in our ordinary view. We speak of the world as a fleeting show that comes and goes, is born and dies, the elements of impermanence and change, finiteness and substantiality, but must ever be connected with the idea of a created universe when it is contrasted with the idea of the all. No matter what may be our beliefs concerning the nature of both, philosopher, metaphysician, scientist, and theologian all agree upon this, and the thought is found in all forms of philosophical thought and religious conceptions. as well as the theories of the respective schools of metaphysics and theology. So the Hermetic teachings do not preach substantiality of the universe any stronger terms than those more familiar to you, although their presentation of the of the subject may seem somewhat more startling. Anything that has a beginning must have an ending, in a sense, unreal and untrue. Anything that has a beginning and an ending must be, in a sense, unreal and untrue. The universe comes under the rule and in all laws of thought. From the absolute point of view, there is nothing real except the all, no matter what terms we may use in thinking of or discussing the subject, whether the universe be created of matter or whether it be a mental creation in the mind of the all. It is unsubstantial, non-enduring, a thing of time, space, and change. We want you to realize this fact thoroughly before you pass judgment on the Hermetic conception of the mental nature of the universe. Think over any and all other conceptions and see whether this not be true of them. But the absolute viewpoint of view shows merely one side of the picture. The other side is a relative one. Absolute truth has been defined as things as the mind of God knows them, while relative truth is things as the highest reason of man understands them. And so while to the all the universe must be unreal and illusionary, a mere dream or result of meditation, nevertheless, to the finite minds forming a part of the universe and viewing it through mortal faculties in the universe is very real indeed, and must be considered. In recognizing the absolute view, we must not take the mistake of ignoring or denying the facts of the phenomenon of the universe as they present themselves to our mortal faculties. We are not the all, remember. So a cell in your body is very aware of itself and what its job, but the cell in the body isn't always constantly aware of everything that you know. It isn't completely aware of your consciousness and things like that. It doesn't know everything you know. It's the same sense. You can't have anything exist outside of everything. If everything's made from one source, then it all comes from the same source. Nothing can exist outside of that, or it wouldn't be the source. So you can't subtract, add, multiply, divide, take anything away, and there can be nothing that opposes it. It is everything, okay? And this is the biggest truth people don't realize, okay? To take familiar illustrations, we must recognize the fact that matter exists to our senses. We will fare badly if we do not. Yet, even in our finite minds, understand the scientific dictum that there is no such thing as matter from a scientific point of view. That which we call matter is held to be merely an aggregation of atoms, which atoms themselves are merely a grouping of units of force called electrons or ions, vibrating in a constant circular motion. We kick a stone, we feel the impact. It seems to be real, notwithstanding that we know it is merely what we have stated above. But remember that our foot feels the impact by the means of our brain. It is likewise matter, so constituted of electrons, for that which so are our brains. And at the best, if we're not by reason of our mind, we would not know the foot or the stone of it all, or at all. It's saying like it's very real to us when you kick or something like that, the pain, the force, the impulse. Then again, the idea of the artist or sculptor, which he is endeavoring to reproduce in stone or canvas, seems very real to him. So do the characters in the mind of the author or the dramatist, when he seeks to express so that others may recognize them. And if it's true in the case of the finite mind, what must be the degree of reality in the mental images created in the mind of the infinite? O friends, to mortals this universe of mentality is very real indeed. It is the only one thing we can ever know, though we rise from plane to plane, higher and higher in it. To know it otherwise, but actual experience, we must be the all itself. It is true that the higher we rise in the scale, the nearer to the mind of the Father we reach. The more apparent becomes the illusionary nature of finite things, but not until the all finally withdraws us, and it does us into itself, does the vision actually vanish. So we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather, let us, recognizing the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws and endeavor to use them the best effect in our upward progression through life. As we travel from plane to plane of being, the laws of the universe are nonetheless iron laws because of the mental nature. All, except the all, are bound by them. What is in the infinite mind of the all is real in the degree second only to the reality of itself, which is vested in the nature of the all. So do not feel insecure or afraid. We are held firmly in the mind of the infinite all, and there is naught to hurt us or for us to fear. There is no power outside of the all to affect us, so we may rest calm and secure. There is a world of comfort and security in the realization once this is attained. The calm and peaceful do we sleep, rocked in the cradle of the deep, resting safely on the bosom of the ocean of the infinite mind, which the all, and in the all, indeed, do we live and move and have our being. Matter is nonetheless matter to us. While we dwell on the plane of matter, although we know it merely to be aggregation of electrons or particle forces vibrating rapidly and gyrating around each other in the formations of atoms, the atoms in turn vibrating and gyrating, forming molecules which latter turn from larger masses of matter, nor does matter become less matter. When we follow the inquiry still further and learn from the Hermetic teachings that the force of which the electrons are but units is merely a manifestation of the mind of the all, and like all else in the universe is purely mental in its nature. While on the plane of matter we recognize its phenomena, we may control matter, as all masters of higher or lesser degree do. But we do so by applying the higher forces. We commit a folly when we attempt to deny the existence of matter in the relative aspect. We may deny its mastery over us, and rightly so, but we should not attempt to ignore its relative aspect, and at least so long we dwell upon this plane. Nor do the laws of nature become less constant or effective when we know them. Likewise, they're merely mental creations. They are in full effect on various planes. We overcome the lower laws by applying still higher ones, and in this way only. But we cannot escape the law or rise above it entirely. Nothing but the all can escape the law. And because that the all is law itself, from which all law emerges. Sorry, I just said that funny, but I'll read it again. Nothing but the all can escape the law, and that is because the all is the law itself, from which all law emerges. The most advanced masters can acquire powers usually attributed to the gods of men, and there are countless ranks of being, in great hierarchy of life, whose being and power transcends even the highest masters among men to the degree of unthinkable by mortals. But even the highest master and the highest being must bow to the law, and be nothing in the eye of the all. So that if even the highest beings, whose power exceed even those attributed by men to their gods, even these are bound by and are subservient. They are bound by and are subservient to the law. Then imagine the presumption of a mortal man, of our race and our grade, when he dares to consider the laws of nature as unreal, visionary, illusionary, because he happens to be able to grasp the truth that the laws are mental in nature and simply mental creations of the all. Those laws which the all intends to be governing laws are not to be defied or argued away. So long as the universe endures, they will endure. And from the universe exists by virtue of these laws from which its framework, which it is held together. The Hermetic principle of mentalism, while explaining the true nature of the universe upon the principle that all is mental, does not change the scientific conceptions of the universe, life, or evolution. In fact, science merely corroborates the Hermetic teachings. The latter merely teaches the nature of the universe is mental, while modern science has taught that it is material, or of late that it is energy, as the last of analysis. The Hermetic teachings have no fault to find with Herbert Spencer's basic principle, which postulates the existence of the infinite internal energy from which all things proceed. In fact, the Hermetics recognize in Spencer's philosophy the highest outside statement of the workings of the natural laws have ever been promulgated, and they believe Spencer has been a reincarnation of an ancient philosopher who dwelt in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago, and who later incarnated as Heraclitus, a Grecian philosopher, around 500 BC, and they regarded his statement of the infinite and internal energy as the direct line from the Hermetic teachings, always with the addition of their own doctrine that his energy is the energy of the mind of the all. With the master key of the Hermetic philosophy, the student of Spencer will be able to unlock many doors of the inner philosophical conceptions of the great English philosopher, whose work shows the results of preparation of his previous incarnations. His teachings regarding the evolution and rhythm are in almost perfect agreement with the Hermetic teachings regarding principle of rhythm. So I want you guys to research Herbert Spencer's work. So the student of Hermetics, oh, you can put it up here. Herbert Spencer. So the student of Hermetics need not lay aside any of his cherished scientific views regarding the universe. All he is asked to do is grasp the underlying principle of the all is mind, the universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. He will find that the other 6 of the 7 principles will fit into his scientific knowledge and will serve to bring out obscure points and throw light in dark corners. This is not to be wondered at when we realize the influence of Hermetic thought on the early philosophers of Greece, upon whose foundations of thought and theories in modern science largely rest. The acceptance of the first Hermetic principle, mentalism, is the only great point between modern science and Hermetic studies. The science is gradually moving towards the Hermetic position and is groping in the dark for a way out of the labyrinth into which it has wandered in its search for reality. The purpose of this lesson is to impress upon the minds of our students the fact that, to all intents and purposes, the universe and its laws and its phenomenon are just as real, so far as man is concerned. And they would be under the hypotheses of materialism, of energism. Under any hypothesis, the universe and its outer aspect is changing, ever-flowing, transitory, and therefore devoid of substantiality and reality. But note the other pole of the truth. Under the same hypothesis, we are compelled to act and live as if the fleeting things were real and substantial. With this difference always between the various hypotheses, and under the old views, mental powers, which was ignored as a natural force, while under mentalism it becomes the great natural force. And this one difference revolutionizes life to those who understand the principle and its resulting laws and practice. So finally, students all grasp the advantage of mentalism and learn to know, use, and apply the laws resulting therefrom. But do not yield to temptation, which, as the Kybalion states, overcome the half-wise, which causes them to be hypnotized by apparent unreality of things, the consequent being that they wander about like dream people, dwelling in the world of dreams, ignoring the practical work and life of a man. The end being they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements, by reason of their folly. Rather fall example of the wise, in which the same authority states, use law against laws, higher against lower, and the art of alchemy, transmute that which is undesirable into which is worthy, and thus triumph. Following the authority, let us avoid half-wisdom, which is folly, which is ignorant in truth that mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on higher. Remember always, student, that transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. And above quotations are from the Kybalion and worthy of being committed to memory by the student. We do not live in a world of dreams, but in a universe which, while relative, is real so far as our lives and actions are concerned. Our business in the universe is not to deny its existence, but to live, using the laws to rise from lower to higher, living on, doing the best that we can under the circumstances arising each day, and living so far as is impossible to our biggest ideas and ideals. The true meaning of life is not to know men of this plane, if indeed to any, but the highest authorities, and our own intuitions teach us that we will make no mistake in living up to the best that is in us, so far as is possible, and realizing the universal tendency of the same direction in spite of apparent evidence to the contrary. We are all on the path, and the road leads ever upward, with frequent resting places. Read the message of the Kybalion, follow the example of the wise, avoiding the mistake of the half-wise who perish by reason of their folly. Let me grab a drink real quick. Chapter 12. This is called the all in all. While all is in the all, it is equally true that the all is in all. To him who truly understands it, the truth hath come great knowledge. So it's not that only that everything is made up of the all, it is true that the all is in everything. How often have the majority of people heard repeated the statement that their deity, called by many names, was all in all, and how little have they suspected the inner occult truth concealed by these carelessly uttered words. The commonly used expression is a survival of the ancient Hermetic maxim quoted above. As Kybalion says, to him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. And this being so, let us seek the truth, the understanding of which means so much. In this statement of truth, this Hermetic maxim, is concealed one of the greatest philosophical and scientific and religious truths. We have given you the Hermetic teachings regarding the mental nature of the universe, the truth that the universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. As the Kybalion says in passage quoted above, all is in the all. But note, also the correlated statement, that it is equally true that the all is in all. This apparently contradictory statement is reconcilable under the law of paradox. It is, moreover, that the exact Hermetic statement of the relations existing between the all and its mental universe we have seen now, all is in the all. Now let us examine the other aspect of the subject. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the all is immanent in remaining within, inherent, abiding within the universe itself, in every part, particle, unit, or combination within the universe. This statement is usually illustrated by the teachers by a reference to the principle of correspondence. The teacher instructs the student to form a mental image of something, a person, idea, something having a mental form. The favorite example being that of the author or dramatist forming an idea of his characters, or a painter sculpting forming an image of an ideal he wishes to express by his art. In each case, the student will find that while the image has its existence and being solely within his mind, yet he, the student, author, painter, or sculptor, in a sense, immanent in, remaining within, or abiding within the mental image also. In other words, the entire virtue, light, spirit of reality in the image is derived from the immanent mind of the thinker. Consider this for a moment until the idea is grasped. So if you're seeing that in your mind, is it not real? Does it not create? Did it not come from you? Is it not from you? So you are the all to that thing. You are everything that it knows and comes from it. Is you are the source. You are the all to that thought. But is not you? Aren't you not a part of that thought? Isn't the all inside of you the same? Right? To take a modern example, let's say that Othello, Iago, Hamlet, Lear, Richard III existed merely in the mind of Shakespeare at the time of their conception or creation, yet Shakespeare also existed within each of these characters, giving them their vitality, spirit, and action. Who is the spirit of the characters that we know? Is Micawber, Oliver Twist, Uriah Heep? It is Dickens. Is it Dickens, or have each of these characters have a personal spirit independent of their creator? Have the Venus of Medici, Sistine Madonna, and Apollo Belvedere spirits and reality of their own, or do they represent the spiritual and mental power of their creators? The law of paradox explains that both propositions are true, viewed from the proper viewpoints. Micawber is both Micawber and yet Dickens. And again, while Micawber may be said to be Dickens, yet Dickens is not identical with Micawber. Man, like Micawber, may exclaim, "The spirit of my creator is inherent within me, and yet I am not he." How different this from shocking half-truths so vociferously announced by certain half-wise, who fill the air with their raucous cries of "I am God." Imagine poor Micawber, or the sneaking Uriah Heep, crying, "I am Dickens." Or some of the lowly clods in one of Shakespeare's play eloquently announcing that "I am Shakespeare." The all is the earthworm, and yet the earthworm is far from being the all. And still, the wonders remain, and that though the earthworm exists merely as a lowly thing created and having its being solely within the mind of the all, yet the all is immanent in the earthworm. And the particles that go to make up the earthworm. Can there be any greater mystery than this? All in the all, and the all in all? The student will, of course, realize that the illustrations given above are necessarily imperfect and inadequate, for they represent the creation of mental images in finite minds, while the universe is a creation of the infinite mind, and the difference between the two poles separates them. It is merely a matter of degree, and the same principle is in operation. The principle of correspondence manifests in each as above, so below, as below, so above. And in the degree that man realizes the existence of the indwelling spirit immanent within his being, so will he rise in the spiritual scale of life. This is what spiritual development means: the recognition, the realization, the manifestation of the spirit within us. Try to remember this last definition, that of the spiritual development. It contains the truth of true religion. There are many planes of being, many subplanes of life, many degrees of existence in the universe. And all depend upon the advancement of beings in the scale, of which scale the lowest point is the grossest matter, the highest scale separated only by the thinnest division from the spirit of the all. And upward and onward along this scale of life, everything is moving. All are on the path, whose end is the all. All progress is returning home. All is upward and onward, in spite of the seemingly contradictory appearances. Such is the message of the illumined. The Hermetic teachings concerning the process of the mental creation of the universe are that the beginning of the creative cycle, the all, in its aspect of being, projects its will towards the aspects of becoming, and the process of creation begins. It is taught that the process consists of lowering of vibration until a very low degree of vibratory energy is reached, at which point the grossest possible form of matter is manifested. This process is called the stage of involution, in which the all becomes involved or wrapped up in its creation. This process is believed by Hermeticists to have a correspondence to the mental process of an artist, writer, or inventor who becomes so wrapped up in his mental creation as to almost forget his own existence, and who, for a time being, almost lives in his creation. If instead of wrapped up, we use the words wrapped, perhaps we will give a better idea of what it means. This involuntary stage of creation is sometimes called outpouring of the divine energy, just as the evolutionary state is called indrawing. The extreme pole of the creative process is considered to be the furthest removed from the all, while the beginning of the evolutionary stage is regarded as the beginning of the return to the swing of the pendulum of rhythm, a coming home, idea being held in the Hermetic teachings. The teachings are that during the outpouring, the vibrations become lower and lower until finally the urge ceases and the return to swing begins. There is difference. That while the outpouring, the creative forces manifest compactly as a whole, yet the beginning of the evolutionary or indrawing stage that is manifested of the law of individualization, that is, the tendency to separate into units of force, so that which they left the all is an individualized energy, returns to its source as countless highly developed units of life, having risen higher and higher in the scale of the physical means, mental and spiritual evolution. Ancient Hermeticists use the word meditation describing the process of the mental creation of the universe, the mind of the all, the word, contemplation, also being frequently employed. But the idea intended seems to be that the employment of the divine attention. Attention is the word derived from Latin root, meaning to reach out, to stretch out. And so the act of attention is to really, as a mental reaching out extension of mental energy. So that underlying idea is readily understood when we examine the real meaning of attention. The Hermetic teachings regarding the process of evolution are that the all, having meditated upon the beginning of creation, having thus established the material foundations of the universe, having thought it into its existence, then gradually awakens or rouses from its meditation, in so doing starting into manifestation the process of evolution on the material, mental, and spiritual planes, successively in that order. Thus, upward movement begins, and all begins to move spiritward. Matter becomes less gross, the units spring into being. The culminations begin to form. Life appears and manifests in higher and higher forms. The mind becomes more and more in evidence. The vibrations constantly become higher. In short, the entire process of evolution in all its phases begins and proceeds according to the established laws of indrawing process. All of this occupies eons upon eons in man's time, each eon containing countless millions of years, but yet the illumined inform us that the entire creation, including involution and evolution of the universe, is but the twinkle in an eye of the all. And at the end of countless cycles of eons in time, the all withdraws its attention in contemplation and meditation of the universe, for the great work is finished, and all is withdrawn into the all from which it emerged. But mystery of the mysteries, the spirit of each soul is not annihilated, but it is infinitely expanded. The Creator and the Creator are merged, such is the report of the illumined. So they're telling you when you draw attention, even when you're looking or giving somebody any kind of attention, you are putting energy into it. So it's very important that when you find somebody or you're with somebody or a friend or anybody, that they're giving you that attention back and you give that attention. So you're not, one is just a leech, because one of you will make out better and none of you will. Either you become stronger together by giving each other attention, or one becomes weaker, one becomes stronger, and that's it. The above illustration of the meditation and subsequent awakening. Where'd I go? The above illustration of the meditation and subsequent awakening from meditation of the all is, of course, but an attempt of the teachers to describe the infinite process by a finite example. And yet, as below, so above, the difference is merely in degree. Just as the all arouses itself from the meditation upon the universe, so does man, in time, cease from manifesting upon the material plane and withdraws himself more and more into the indwelling spirit, which is indeed the divine ego. There's one more matter of which we desire to speak in this lesson that comes very near to the invasion of the metaphysical field of speculation. Although our purpose is merely to show the futility of such speculation, we allude to question which inevitability comes to the mind of all thinkers who have ventured to seek the truth. The question is, why does the all create universes? The question may be asked in different forms, but the above is the gist of the inquiry. Men have striven hard to answer this question, but still there is no answer worthy of the name. Some have imagined that the all had something to gain by it, but this is absurd, for what could the all gain it is not already possessed? Others have sought to answer the idea that the all wished something to love, and others that it created for pleasure or amusement, or because it was lonely, or to manifest its power. All puerile explanations and ideas belonging to the childish periods of thought. Others have sought to explain the mystery by assuming the all found itself compelled to create by reason of its own internal nature and creative instinct. This idea is in advance of the others, but its weak point lies in the idea that the all being compelled by anything internal or external. If its internal nature or creative instinct compelled it to do anything, the internal nature or creative instinct would be the absolute instead of the all. So according to the part of the proposition falls. And yet the all does create and manifest and seems to find some kind of satisfaction in doing so. It is difficult to escape the conclusion that in some infinite degree it must have what would correspond to the inner nature or creative instinct in man with correspondingly infinite desire and will. It could not act unless it willed to act, and it would not will to act unless it desired to act, and would not desire to act unless it obtained some satisfaction thereby. And all of these things would belong to an inner nature and might be postulated as existing according to the law of correspondence, but still we prefer to think of the all as acting entirely free from any influence, internal as well as external. That is the problem which lies in the root of difficulty, and difficulty that lies in the root of the problem. Strictly speaking, there cannot be said to be any reason whatsoever for the all to act, for a reason implies a cause, and the all is above cause and effect, except when it wills to become a cause, in which time the principle is set into motion. So you see, the matter is unthinkable, just as the all is unknowable, just as we say the all is merely is. So we are compelled to say that the all acts because it acts. At last, the all is all reason in itself, all law in itself, all action in itself, and it may be said truthfully that the all is its own reason, its own law, its own act, or still further, the all, its reason, its act, its law are one, all being names for the same thing. In the opinion of those who are given these present lessons, the answer is locked upon the inner self of the all, along with its secret of being. The law of correspondence, in our opinion, reaches only that the aspect of the all which may be spoken, the aspect of becoming, back at the aspect of being, which is all laws are lost in law, which all principles merge into principle, and the all, principle, and being are identical and one and the same. Therefore, metaphysical speculation on this point is futile. We go into the matter here merely to show we recognize the question and also the absurdity of the ordinary answers of metaphysics and theology. In conclusion, it may be of an interest to our students to learn that while some of the ancient and modern Hermetic teachers have rather inclined in the direction of applying their principal correspondence to the question, with the result of the inner nature conclusion, still the legends have it that Hermes the Great, when asked this question by his advanced students, answered by pressing his lips together and saying not a word, indicating that there was no answer. But then he may have intended to apply the axiom of his philosophy: the lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of the understanding, believing that even his advanced students did not possess the understanding which entitled them to the teaching. At any rate, if Hermes possessed the secret, he failed to impart it. And so far as the world is concerned, the lips of Hermes are closed regarding it. And while the great Hermes hesitated to speak, what mortal may dare to teach? But remember that whatever be the answer to this problem, if indeed there be an answer to the truth that remains, while all is in the all, it is equally true that the all is in all. The teaching on this point is emphatic, and we may add the concluding words of the quotation: to him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. Chapter 13, Planes of Correspondence, as above, so below. I hope you guys are enjoying these teachings, by the way. I know only a few of you watch compared to the others, but I think it'll catch on. And for those of you who do watch it, I'm sure you'll actually go back and read it and watch it again and again and again. Maybe pick up your own copy, share it. I found it easy when I read these out loud that I can go back and listen to my own voice again, kind of follow along with the words, and I get more out of it. So I hope you guys get more out of it as you read along and you hear me discuss and mess up my words and do things like that. We're all human, but we're all trying to learn together. And I really hope you enjoy this, because these teachings, this message is brought to me for a reason. I just follow them. I give them to you, but they're all here for a reason. I promise you that. I only follow my heart, and that's what brings me here. So hope you guys enjoy. The great second Hermetic principle embodies the truth that there is harmony, agreement, and correspondence between several planes of manifestation, life, and being. This truth is a truth because all that is included in the universe emanates from the same source, and the same laws, principles, and characteristics apply to each unit or combination of units of activity, and each manifests its own phenomenon upon its own plane. For the purpose of convenience of thought and study, the Hermetic philosophy considers that the universe may be divided into three great classes of phenomena, known as the three great planes, namely the great physical plane, the great mental plane, and the great spiritual plane. These divisions are more or less artificial and arbitrary, for the truth is that all three of their divisions are but ascending degrees of the great scale of life, the lowest point from which is undifferentiated matter, and the highest point is spirit. Moreover, the different planes shade into each other, so that no hard or fast division may be between the higher phenomena or physical or lower of the mental, or between the higher of the mental and the lower of the physical. In short, the three great planes may be regarded as three great groups of degrees in life's manifestations. While the purpose of this little book does not allow us to enter the extended discussion or explanation of the subject of or the different planes, we think we'll give a general description of the same at this point. At the beginning, we may as well consider the question so often asked by the neophyte, who desires to be informed regarding the meaning of the word plane, which term has been very freely used and very poorly explained. In many recent works upon the subject of occultism, the question is generally about as follows: is a plane a place having a dimension, or is it merely a condition or state? We answer no, not a place, nor ordinary dimension of space, and yet more than a state of or condition. It may be considered as a state or condition, and yet the state or condition is a degree of a dimension and a scale subject to measurement. Somewhat paradoxical, is it not? But let us examine a matter. A dimension, is a measure in a straight line relating to a measure, etc. Ordinary dimensions are space, length, breadth, height, or perhaps length, breadth, height, thickness, or circumference. But there is another dimension of created things, or measure in a straight line, known to the occultists and scientists as well, although the latter have not applied the terms to dimension to it. This new dimension, which, by the way, is more speculated about, fourth dimension, is standard using the determining of the degrees or planes. The fourth dimension may be called the dimension of vibration. It is a fact well known by modern science, as well as the Hermeticists, who have embodied the truth of the inner third Hermetic principle, that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. From the highest manifestation to the lowest, everything in all vibrates. Not only do they vibrate at different rates of motion, but in the different directions and in different manner. The degrees and rate of vibrations constitute the degrees of measurement and the scale of vibrations. In other words, the degrees of the fourth dimension. And these degrees, from what occultists call planes, the higher degree or rate of vibration, the higher plane, the higher manifestation of life accompanying life, occupying that plane. So that while a plane is not a place, nor yet a state or condition, yet it possesses qualities common to both. We shall have more to say regarding this subject on the scale of vibrations in our next lessons, in which we consider the Hermetic principle of vibration. You will kindly remember, however, the three great planes are not actual divisions of the phenomena of the universe, but merely arbitrary terms used by the Hermeticists in order to aid the thought and study of various degrees and forms of universal activity in life. The atom of matter, the unit of force, the mind of man, the being of an archangel are all degrees in one scale, and all fundamentally the same. The difference between solely our matter degree, the rate of vibration, all creations of the all, and have their existence solely within the infinite mind of the all. The Hermeticists subdivide each three great planes into 7 minor planes, and each of these latter are subdivided into 7 subplanes, all divisions more or less arbitrary, shading into each other and adopted merely for the convenience of scientific study and thought. The great physical plane, its 7 minor planes, and the division of its phenomena in the universe, which includes all relates to physics, material things, forces, and manifestations. It includes all forms which we call matter and all forms that we call energy or force. We must remember that the Hermetic philosophy does not recognize matter as a thing in itself or having a separate existence, even the mind of the all. The teachings are that the matter is a form of energy that is energy at a low rate of vibration of a certain kind. According to the Hermeticists, classify matter under the head of energy and give it 3 of 7 minor planes in the great physical plane. These 7 minor physical planes are as follows: the plane of matter, plane of matter, plane of matter, plane of ethereal, the plane of energy, plane of energy, plane of energy. ABC, obviously. The plane of matter, A, comprises the forms of matter and its forms of solids, liquid, gases, and generally recognized by textbooks on physics. Plane of matter, B, comprises certain higher and more subtle forms of matter of existence, which modern science is now recognizing. The phenomena of radiant matter and its phases of radium, etc., belonging to the lower subdivision of this minor plane. The plane of matter, C, comprises forms of more subtle and tenuous matter, the existence of which not is suspected by ordinary scientists. The plane of ethereal substance comprises that which science speaks of as the ether, a substance of extreme tenuity and elasticity, pervading all universal space and acting as a medium for the transmission of waves of energy, such as light, heat, electricity, etc. This etherical substance forms a connecting link between matter and energy and partakes of the nature of each. The Hermetic teachings, however, instruct that this plane has 7 subdivisions, and all have minor planes, and that in fact there are 7 ethers instead of but 1. Next, above the plane of the ethereal substance comes the plane of energy, A, which comprises the ordinary forms of energy known to science, and its 7 subplanes being respectively heat, light, magnetism, electricity, attraction, including gravitation, cohesion, chemical affinity, and several other forms of energy indicated by science experience but not yet named or classified. The plane of energy comprises of 7 subplanes of higher forms of energy not yet discovered by science, which is called nature's finer forces, and which are called into operation in the manifestations of central forms of mental phenomena, by which such phenomena becomes possible. The plane of energy, C, comprises 7 subplanes of energy so highly organized that it bears many of the characteristics of life, which is not recognized by the minds of men or the ordinary plane of development, being available for the use of on beings for the spiritual plane alone. Such energy is unthinkable to ordinary men and may be considered almost as divine power. The beings employing the same areas are as gods compared to the highest types of humans known to us. The great mental plane comprises those forms of living things known to us in the ordinary life, as well as certain forms that's not so well known except to occultists. The classification of the 7 minor mental planes and more or less satisfactory and arbitrary, unless accompanied by elaborate explanations which are foreign to the purpose of this particular work, but we may as well mention them. They are as follows. The plane of the mineral mind, the plane of the elemental mind, A, the plane of the plant mind, the plane of the elemental mind, B, the plane of the animal mind, the plane of the elemental mind, C, the plane of the human mind. The plane of the mineral mind comprises of the states or conditions or the units of entities or groups, combinations of the same, which animate the forms known as minerals, chemicals. These entities must not be confounded with the molecules, atoms, and corpuscles themselves, the latter being merely the material bodies or forms of these entities, just as a man's body is but his material form and not himself. These entities may be called souls in one sense. They are living beings in a low degree of development, life, and mind. There's just more than the units of living energy. which comprise the higher subdivisions with the highest physical plane. The average mind does not generally attribute the possession of mind, soul, or life to mineral kingdom, but all occultists recognize the existence of the same, and modern science is rapidly moving forward to the point of view of the Hermetic in this respect. The molecules, atoms, and corpuscles, and loves and hates, likes and dislikes, attractions and repulsions, affinities and non-affinities, etc. And some more daring modern scientific minds have expressed the opinion that desire and will, emotions and feelings of the atoms differ only in degree from those of men. We have no time or space to argue this matter here. All occultists know this to be fact, and others are referred to some of the more recent scientific works from the outside corroboration. There are usual 7 subdivisions to this plane. Plane of elemental mind A comprises the state or condition and degree of mental vital development of a class of entities known as average man. But recognized to occultists, they are invisible to ordinary senses of man, but nevertheless exist and play their part in the drama of the universe. Their degree of intelligence is between that of a mineral and chemical entities on one hand and that of the plant kingdom on the other. There are 7 subdivisions to this plane. So it's almost like a fire spirit or a fairy or something like that of these old tales. That's kind of what they're talking about. The plane of a plant mind is the 7 subdivisions, comprises the states of conditions of the entities comprising the kingdoms of the plant world, the vital and mental phenomenon of which is fairly well understood by the average intelligent person. Many new and interesting scientific works regarding mind and life in plants have been published during the last decade. Plants have life, mind, and souls, as well as the animals, man, and Superman. The plane of the elemental mind, B, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises the states and conditions of higher form of elemental or unseen entities playing their part in the general work of the universe, the mind and life of which form of these scale between plane of plant and animal, and they partake in the nature of both. The plane of the animal mind in its 7 subdivisions comprises the states and conditions of the entities, beings, or souls emanating from the animal forms of life, familiar to us all. It is not existing to go into details regarding this kingdom of plane, for the animal world is familiar to us in our own. The plane of the elemental mind, its 7 subdivisions, and these entities are beings invisible, are all such elemental forms which partake in the nature of both animal and human life in a degree and certain combinations. The highest forms are semi-human in intelligence. The plane of the human mind and its 7 subdivisions comprises those manifestations of life and mentality which are common to man in his various grades, degrees, and divisions. In this connection, we must put out the fact that average man today occupies but the 4 subdivisions of the plane of the human mind, and only the most intelligent have crossed the borders of the 5th subdivision. It has taken this race millions of years to reach this stage, and it will take many more for us to reach and move on to the 6th stage and the 7th stage subdivisions and beyond. But remember, there have been races before us which have passed through these degrees and then on to higher planes. Our own race is the 5th, with stragglers from the 4th, which is set upon the path. And there was a few advanced souls of our own race who outstripped the masses and who have passed on to the 6th and 7th subdivision, some few being still further on. The man of the 6th subdivision will be Superman. He of the 7th will be the Overman. In consideration of our 7 minor mental planes, we have merely referred to 3 elementary planes in the general way. We do not wish to go into this subject in detail for this work, for it does not belong to the part of the general philosophy and teachings, but we may say this much, in order to give you a little clearer idea of the relations of these planes and more familiar ones. The elementary planes bear the same relation to the planes of minerals, plants, animals, human mentality of life, and the black keys on the piano due to the white. The white keys are sufficient to produce music, but there are certain scales, melodies, and harmonies in which the black keys play their part and in which the presence is necessary. So they're also necessary connecting links of soul-conditioned entity states between several other planes, certain forms of development being attained therein. This last fact giving to the reader who can read between the lines a new light upon the process of evolution, and a new key to the secret door of the leaps of life between the kingdoms and kingdoms. The great kingdom of elementals are fully recognized by all occultists, and esoteric writings are a full mention of them. The readers of Bulwer's Sononi and familiar tales will recognize the entities inhabiting these planes of life. Passing on from the great mental plane into the spiritual plane, what shall we say? How can we explain these higher states of being? Life and mind, to minds yet unstable to grasp understand the higher subdivisions of the plane of the human mind. The task is impossible. We speak only in the most general terms. How may light be described to a man born blind? How sugar to a man who never tasted anything sweet? How harmony to one born deaf? All that we can say is 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane, each minor plane having its 7 subdivisions, comprise beings possessing life, mind, and form, as above that of man, to the day, and the latter is above the earthworm, mineral, or even the certain forms of energy and matter. The life of these beings so far transcends ours that we cannot even think of the details of the same. Their minds so far transcend ours that we scarcely seem to think, and our mental processes seem almost akin to material processes. The matter of which their forms are comprised is the highest planes of matter. Nay, some are even said to be clothed with pure energy. What may be said of such beings? On the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane exists, of whom we speak as angels, archangels, or demigods. On the lower minor planes dwell the great souls we call masters and adepts. Above them come the great hierarchies of the angelic hosts, unthinkable to man, and above those who come without an irreverence be called the gods, so high in the scale of being that their being, their intelligence, and their power being akin, attributed to those by the races and their conceptions of the deity. Those beings are beyond even the highest flights of human imagination, and the word divine being the only applicable one for them. Many of these beings, as well as the angelic hosts, take the greatest interest in the affairs of the universe and play an important part in the affairs. These unseen divinities and angelic helpers extend their influence freely and powerfully in the process of evolution and cosmic progress. Their occasional intervention and assistance in the human affairs have led to many legends, beliefs, religions, traditions of the race, past and present. They have superimposed their knowledge and power upon the world again and again, and under the law of the all, of course. And yet again, the highest of these advanced beings exist merely as creations of and in the mind of the all, and are subject to the cosmic process of the universal laws. They are still mortal. We may call them gods if we like, but are elder brethren of the race, and the advanced souls who outstrip their brethren, and who have forgone the ecstasy of absorption by the all, in order to help the race on its upward journey along the path. But they belong to the universe and are subject to its conditions. They are mortal, and their plane is below that of absolute spirit. The only most advanced Hermeticists are able to grasp the inner teachings regarding the state of existence and the powers manifested on the spiritual planes. The phenomenon is so much higher than that of the mental planes that a confusion of ideas would surely result from an attempt to describe the same. Only those who have minds have been carefully trained along the lines of Hermetic philosophy for years. Yes, those who have brought them from other incarnations, knowledge acquired previously, can comprehend just what is meant by the teaching regarding these spiritual planes. And much of these inner teachings is held by the Hermeticists as being too scared, important, or even dangerous for the general public's dissemination. The intelligent student may recognize that what we mean by this when we state the meaning of the spirit are used by Hermeticists are akin to living power, animated force, inner essence, essence of life, etc., which meaning must not be confounded by the usually commonly employed in connection with the term religious, ecclesiastical, spiritual, ethereal, holy, etc. To occultists, the word spirit is used in the sense of the animating people carrying with the idea of power, living energy, mystic force. The occultists know that which is known to the spiritual power may be employed for evil as well as good ends, in accordance to the principle of polarity, as the fact that we've been recognized by the majority of religions and their conceptions of Satan, Beelzebub, the devil, Lucifer, fallen angels, etc., and so on. And so the knowledge regarding the planes have been kept in the holies of holies and all esoteric fraternities and occult orders in the secret chamber of the temple. But this may be said here, that those who have attained high spiritual powers and have misused them have a terrible fate in store for them, and the swing of the pendulum of rhythm will inevitably swing them back to the furthest extreme of material existence, from which point they must retrace their steps spiritward along the weary rounds of the path, but always with the added torture of having always with them a lingering memory of the heights from which they fell from their own evil actions. The legends of the fallen angels have a basis in actual facts, and all advanced occultists know the striving for selfish power on spiritual planes inevitably results in the selfish soul losing its spiritual balance and falling back as far as it had previously ridden. But to even such a soul the opportunity of return is given, Such souls make their return journey, paying the terrible penalty according to the invariable law. In conclusion, we could again remind you that according to the principle of correspondence, which embodies the truth, as above, so below, as below, so above, all 7 Hermetic principles are in full operation on all of the many planes, physical, mental, and spiritual. The principle of mental substance, of course, applies to all planes, and for all are held in the mind of the all. The principle of correspondence manifests in all. And there is a correspondence, harmony, and agreement between several planes. The principle of vibration manifests on all planes. In fact, the very differences that go and make the planes arises from vibration, as we have explained. The principle of polarity manifests on each plane, the extremes of the poles being apparently opposite and contradictory. The principle of rhythm manifests on each plane, the movement of the phenomena having ebb and flow, rise and flow, incoming and outgoing. The principle of cause and effect manifests on each plane, every effect having its cause and every cause having its effect. The principle of gender manifests on every plane, the creative energy being always manifest and operating along the lines of its masculine and feminine aspects. As above, so below. As below, so above. The centuries-old Hermetic axiom embodies one of the great principles of the universal phenomena. As we proceed with our consideration of the remaining principles, we will see even more clearly the truth of the universal nature of the great principle of correspondence. Okay, so I'm trying to get through this, guys. Trying to read it to you as fast as I can, so you can get as much as you can, play it back, pause it, have it legible, understandable. And as I said, so you don't have to do it in like 16 parts. I might have to do another part, but we'll see how far I go. There's like 7 or 8 more chapters, so we might get through them, we might not. We'll see. Well, we'll see how it goes. Some of them are really short, and I can read them fast. So, take a puff off the peace pipe. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. The Kybalion. The great third Hermetic principle, the principle of vibration, embodies the truth that motion is manifest in everything in the universe, that nothing is at rest, everything moves, vibrates, and circles. This Hermetic principle was recognized by some of the early Greek philosophers who embodied it in their systems, but then, for centuries, it was lost sight of by the thinkers outside of the Hermetic ranks. But in the 19th century, physical science rediscovered the truth. In the 20th century, scientists discovered that they had additional proofs of the correctness and truth of the centuries-old Hermetic doctrine. The Hermetic teachings are that not only is everything constantly moving and vibrating, but that the differences between the various manifestations of the universal power are due entirely to the varying rate and mode of vibrations. Not only this, that even the all itself manifests a constant vibration of such an infinite degree of intensity and rapid motion that it may be practically considered at rest. The teachers directing the attention of the students to the fact that even the physical plane, a rapidly moving object such as a revolving wheel, seems to be at rest. The teaching are the effect that the spirit is at one end of the pole of vibration, and the other pole is certainly extremely gross forms of matter. Between these two poles are millions upon millions different rates and modes of vibration. Modern science has proven that all that we call matter and energy are but modes of vibratory motion, and some of the more advanced scientists are rapidly moving toward the positions of the occultists who uphold the phenomenon of mind and likewise modes of vibration or motion. Sorry, I don't know where it was now. Modern scientists, let's see. All right. Modern science has proven that all we call matter and energy are but modes of vibratory motion, and some of our more advanced scientists are rapidly moving towards the positions of the occultists who hold that the phenomena of mind are likewise modes of vibration and motion. Let us see what science has to say regarding the question of vibrations and matter of energy. In the first place, science teaches that all matter manifests in some degree, the vibrations arising from temperature or heat. be an object cold or hot, both being degrees of the same thing. It manifests certain heat vibrations, and in the same sense in its motion and vibration. Then all particles of matter are in circular motion, from corpuscle to sun. Planets revolve around suns, and many of them turn on their axes. The sun moves around great central points, and they are believed to move around still greater, and so on, ad infinitum. The molecules of which the particular kinds of matter are composed are in a state of constant vibration and movement around each other and against each other. The molecules are composed of atoms, which likewise are in a state of constant movement and vibration. The atoms are composed of corpuscles, sometimes called electrons, ions, etc., which are also in a state of rapid motion, revolving around each other, and which manifest a very rapid state of mode vibration. And so we see that all forms of matter manifest vibration in accordance to the Hermetic principle of vibration. And so it is with the various forms of energy. Science teaches that light, heat, magnetism, and electricity are but forms of vibratory motion connected in some way with, probably emanating from the ether. Science does not yet attempt to explain the nature of the phenomenon known as cohesion, except my friend over at Theoria Apostia does, which is the principle of molecular attraction, nor chemical affinity, which is the principle of atomic attraction, nor gravitation, the greatest mystery of the three, which is the principle of attraction by every particle of mass and matter bound to every other particle of mass. These three forms of energy are not yet understood by science, yet the writers incline to the opinion that these two are manifestations of some form of vibratory energy, a fact that Hermeticists have held and taught for ages. Universal ether, which is postulated by science without its nature being understood clearly, is held by the Hermeticists to be but a higher manifestation of which is erroneously called matter. That is to say, matter at a high rate of degree of vibration that is called by them the ethereal substance. The Hermeticists teach that the ethereal substance's extreme tenuity and elasticity pervades universal space, serving as a medium of transmission of waves of vibratory energy such as heat, light, and electricity, magnetism, etc. The teachings are that the ethereal substance is a connecting link between the forms of vibratory energy known as matter, and on one hand, the energy or force on the other, and also manifests a degree of vibration and a rate of mode entirely its own. Scientists have offered the illustration of rapidly moving wheel, top, or cylinder to show the effects of increasing rates of vibration. The illustration supposes a wheel or a top revolving cylinder running at a low rate of speed. We'll call this revolving thing an object. Following out or in this illustration, let us suppose the object moving slowly. It may be seen readily, but no sound of movement reaches the ear. The speed is gradually increased. In a few moments, its movement becomes so rapid that a deep growl or low note may be heard. And then a rate is increased, and the note rises on 1 in the music scale. Then the motion still being further increased, the next highest note is distinguished. Then one after another. All the notes on the musical scale appear, rising higher and higher, and the motion is increased. Finally, when the motions have reached a certain rate, the final note perceptible to human ears is reached, and the shrill, perceiving shriek dies, and silence follows. No sound is heard from the revolving object, the rate of motion being so high the human ear cannot hear the vibration, register the vibrations. Then comes the perception. Those are probably delta waves. Then comes the perception of rising degrees of heat. Then, after quite a time, the eye catches a glimpse of the object becoming dull, darkish red color. As the rate increases, it becomes brighter. When the speed is increased, it melts red into orange. The orange melts into a yellow, then following successively the shades of green, blue, indigo, finally violet. At a rate as its speed increases, the violet shades away and all colors disappear. The human eye is not able to register them, but they are invisible rays emanating from the revolving object. The rays are known and used in photography and other angles of light. They begin to manifest peculiar rays known as X-rays, etc. The constitution, even up to gamma rays, radio waves, right? Electricity and magnetism are emitted on the appropriate rate of vibration is attained. When the object reaches a certain rate of vibration, its molecules disintegrate and resolve themselves into the original elements or atoms. Then the atoms, following the principle of vibration, are separated into countless corpuscles of which they are composed. And finally, even the corpuscles disappear, and the object may be said to be composed of ethereal substance. Science does not dare follow the illustration further, but the Hermeticists teach that if the vibrations be continuously increased, that the Object would mount up the successive states of manifestation and would turn manifestations into mental stages, and then on to spirit world, and then it would finally re-enter the all, which is absolute spirit. The object, however, would have ceased to be an object long before the stage of ethereal substance was reached. But otherwise, the illustration is correct inasmuch as it shows the effect of constantly increased rates of modes of vibration. It is remembered that the above illustration that in the stages that the object throws off vibrations of light, heat, etc. is not actually resolved into the forms of energy, which are on a much higher scale, but simply that it reaches a degree of vibration in which those forms of energy are liberated in a degree from the confining influence of its molecules, atoms, and corpuscles. Corpuscles, there you go. And the case be that these forms of energy, although much higher in the scale than matter, are imprisoned and confined in the material combinations by reasons of energies manifesting through and using material forms, but thus becoming entangled and confined in their creations of material forms, which to an extent is true to all creators, creating force becoming involved with its creation. But the Hermetic teachings go much further than to those of modern science. They teach that all manifestations of thought, emotion, reason, will, or desire, or any mental state or condition are accompanied by vibration, a portion of which are thrown off, which tend to affect the minds of other persons by induction. This is a principle which produces the phenomena of telepathy, mental influence, and other forms of action and power of mind over mind, which the general public is rapidly becoming acquainted owing to the wide dissemination of occult knowledge by the various schools, cults, and teachers along these lines at the time. Every thought, emotion, or mental state has a corresponding rate and mode of vibration. By an effort of the will of the person or the other person, these mental states can be reproduced, just as a musical note may be reproduced by causing an instrument to vibrate at a certain rate, just as color may be reproduced in the same way, by a knowledge of the principle of vibration. As applied to the mental phenomena, one may polarize his mind at any degree he wishes, thus gaining a perfect control over his mental states, moods, etc. In the same way, he affects the minds of others, producing the desired mental state is in them. In short, he will be able to produce on the mental plane that which the science produces on the physical plane, vibrations at will. This power, of course, may be acquired only by the proper instruction, exercises, practice, etc. Science being that the mental transmutation, one of the branches of the Hermetic art. A little reflection on what we have said will show the student that the principle of vibration underlies the wonderful phenomena of the power manifested by the masters and adepts, who are able to apparently set aside the laws of nature, but who, in reality, are simply using one law against another, one principle against others, and who accomplish their result by changing the vibrations of material objects or forms of energy, and thus perform the commonly called miracles. As one of the old Hermetic writers has truly said, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power. So I was reading the chapters to you wrong this whole time. This is chapter 9. You guys probably think I'm a dummy. But here's chapter 10. For some reason, I thought we read more than this, but I guess we didn't. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. This is polarity. Everything has a pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truth. All paradoxes must be reconciled. The great fourth Hermetic principle, the principle of polarity, embodies the truth that all things are manifested. Things have two sides, two aspects, two poles, a pair of opposites, with manifold degrees between the two extremes. The old paradoxes, which have ever perplexed the mind of men, are explained by the understanding of this principle. Man has always recognized something akin to this principle and has endeavored to express by saying such maxims and aphorisms. Everything isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truth. Every truth is half-false. There are two sides to everything. There's a reverse side to every shield, etc., etc. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the difference between these things seemingly diametrically opposed to each other is merely a matter of degree. It teaches the pair of opposites may be reconciled, and the thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree, and the universal reconciliation of opposites is affected by a recognition of the principle of polarity. The teachers claim the illustrations of the principle may be held on every hand and form an examination of the real nature of anything. They begin to show that the spirit and matter are but two poles of the same thing, the intermediate planes being merely degrees of vibration. They show the all and the many are the same, the difference between merely a matter of degree and mental manifestation. Thus, the law and the laws of two opposite poles of one thing, likewise principle and principles, the infinite mind and the finite minds. Then passing on to the physical plane. They illustrate the principle by showing that heat and cold are identical in nature, the differences being merely a matter of degrees. The thermometer shows many degrees of temperature, the lowest pole being called cold, the highest called heat. Between these two poles are many degrees of heat or cold. Call them either and you are equally correct. The higher of 2 degrees is always warmer, while the lower is always colder. There's no absolute standard in the matter of degree. There's no place at the thermometer where heat ceases and cold begins, and all in the matter of higher and lower vibration. The very terms high and low, which we are compelled to use, are but poles of the same thing, that your terms are relative. So with east and west, travel around the world in the eastward direction, and you'll reach a point which would called west from your starting point. And you return from the westward point, travel far enough and north, vice versa. Light and darkness are poles of the same thing and many degrees between them. The musical scale and the same thing, starting with C, you move upward and you reach another C, and so on. Differences between the two ends of the board being the same. The many degrees between the two extremes, the scale of the color is the same, higher and lower vibrations being only difference between high violet and low red. Large and small are relative, so are the noise, quiet, hard, soft, follow the rule. Likewise, sharp and dull, positive and negative are two poles of the same thing with countless degrees between them. Good and bad are not absolute. We call them one end of the scale and the other good. We call one end good, the other bad. Well, one end good and the other evil. According to the use of the terms, a thing is less good than the thing higher than the scale, but less good the thing is in turn more good than the thing next below it, and so on, more or less being regulated by the position on the scale. And so it is on the mental plane. Love and hate are generally regarded as being things diametrically opposed to each other, entirely different, unreconcilable. But we apply the principle of polarity. We find there is no such thing as absolute love or absolute hate as distinguished from each other. There are two merely terms applied to the two poles of the same thing. Beginning at any point, we find a scale of more love or less hate, and we ascend the scale more hate or less love, and we descend, we find being true no matter what from what point high or low we may start. There are degrees of love and hate, and there is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between them. Courage and fear become the same under rule. The pair of opposites exist everywhere. You find one thing and its opposite, and you find the two poles, like fear and hope. You can fear today's going to be a bad day, or you can hope that it's going to be a good one. You can apply that everywhere. Stay positive. And it is the fact that enables Hermeticists to transmute one mental state into another. Along the lines of polarization, things being different to classes cannot be transmuted into each other, but things of the same class may be changed, that is, may have their polarity changed. Thus, love never becomes east or west, red or violet. It may be often and does turn into hate, and likewise hate may be transformed into love by changing its polarity. Courage may be transmuted into fear in reverse. Hard things may be rendered soft, dull, things become sharp, hot things becomes cold, and so on. The transmutation always being between the things of the same kind to different degrees. Take the case of a fearful man. By raising his mental vibrations along the line of fear, courage, he can be filled with the highest degree of courage and fearlessness, and likewise the slothful man may be changed himself into an actful, energetic individual simply by polarizing along the lines of the desired quality. The student who is familiar with the process by which the various schools of mental science, etc., produce changes in the mental state of these following teachings may not readily understand the principle underlying many of these changes. When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity. Sliding along the same scale of the Hatter is readily understood. The change is not in the nature of transmutation of one thing into another entirely, but different, but it is merely a change of degree in the same thing. Vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane. It is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc., but heat may be readily transmuted into cold, simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way, hate and love are mutably transmutable. mutually transmutable. So are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has opposite poles along which the transmutation is possible. The student will readily recognize that in the mental state, as well as the phenomenon of the physical plane, the two poles may be classified as positive and negative, respectively. Thus, love is positive to hate, courage to fear, activity to non-activity, etc., etc. It would be noticed that even those unfamiliar with the principle of vibration in the positive pole seems to be of a higher degree than the negative, and readily dominates it. The tendency of nature is in the direction of the dominant activity of the positive pole. In addition to the changing of the poles of one's mental states by the operation of the art of polarization, the phenomenon of mental influence in its manifold phases shows us that the principle may extend it so as to embrace the phenomenon of what influence of one mind over that of another, in which so less has been written and taught of late years, which it is understood that the mental induction is impossible, that the mental states may be produced by induction from others, and that we can readily see how the certain rate of vibration or polarization of a mental state may be communicated to another person, and his polarity in that class of a mental state thus changed. It is along this principle that the results of many mental treatments are obtained. For instance, a person is blue, melancholy, full of fear. A mental scientist bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration by his trained will, and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case, then reproduces a similar mental state in the other by induction, the result being the vibrations are raised by the other person's polarizes towards the positive end of the scale instead of the negative. Why is she ripping the blanket? And then the negative in his fear and the negative in his emotions transmuted to courage and similar positive mental states. A little study will show these polarizations, the change of being 1 degree rather than of a kind. A knowledge of the existence of the great Hermetic principle will enable the student to better understand his own mental states and those of other people. He will see these states of all matters of degree, and seeing thus he will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will, to change his mental poles, and thus be a master of his mental states, instead of being a servant and a slave. By his knowledge, he will be able to aid his fellows intelligently and by appropriate methods change the polarity when the same is desirable. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with the principle of polarity, and for a correct understanding of the same will throw light on many subjects. We're flowing right along here. These aren't long, so I'm going to keep reading them. This one's Rhythm, chapter 11. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swings and manifests in everything. The measure of swing is to the right, the measure of swing to the left. The rhythm compensates. The great fifth Hermetic principle, the principle of rhythm, embodies the truth that in everything there is a manifested measure of motion, to and from movement, a flow and inflow, a swing forward and backward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide, ebb, flow, a high tide and a low tide, between the two poles manifest on the physical, mental, or spiritual planes. The principle of rhythm is closely connected with the principle of polarity described in the preceding chapter. Rhythm manifests between the two poles established by the principle of polarity. This does not mean, however, the pendulum of rhythm swings to the extreme poles, for this rarely happens. In fact, it is difficult to establish the extreme polar opposites in the majority of cases, but the swing is ever toward the first pole and then the other. There is always an action and reaction, an advance and a retreat, rising and sinking, manifested in the airs and the phenomenon of the universe. Suns, world, men, animals, plants, minerals, forces, energies, mind, matter, yes, even spirits manifest this principle. The principle manifests in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life history of all things, and finally, in the mental states of man. Beginning with the manifestation of the spirit of the all, it will be noticed that there is the ever outpouring and the indrawing, the outbreathing and inbreathing of Brahm, as the Brahmas word it. The universes are created, reach their extreme low point of materiality, and then begin upward swing. Suns spring into being, and then their height, their power being reached, they possess. Retrogression begins, and after eons they become dead masses of matter, awaiting another impulse which starts again. The inner energies and activity of new solar life has begun, a new solar cycle. And thus it is with all worlds. They are born, they grow, they die, only to be reborn. And thus it is with all things of shape and form. They swing from action to reaction, from birth to death, from activity to inactivity, and then back again. Thus is the will of all living things. They are born, grow, and die. They are reborn. And so it is with all great movements, philosophies, creeds, fashions, governments, nations, and all else: birth, growth, maturity, decadence, death, and then new birth. The swing of the pendulum is ever in its evidence. Night follows day, day and night. The pendulum swings from the summer to winter and then back again. The corpuscles, atoms, molecules, and masses of matter swing around the cycle in their nature, and no such thing as absolute rest or cessation from movement, and all movement partakes of rhythm, the principle of the universal application. It may be applied to any question or phenomenon at many planes of its life. It may be applied to all phases of human activity. There is always rhythmic swing from one pole to the other. The universal pendulum ever in motion, the tides of life flow in and out according to law. The principle of rhythm is well understood by modern science and considered a universal law as applied to material things, but the Hermeticists carry the principle much further and know that the manifestations and influence extend to the mental activities of man, and that is account for the bewildering succession of moods, feelings and annoying and perplexing changes that we notice in ourselves. But the Hermeticists, by studying the operations of this principle, have learned to escape some of its activities by transmutation. The Hermetic masters long since discovered that while the principle of rhythm was invariable, its ever evidence in the mental phenomena, still there are two planes of its manifestation so far as mental phenomena is concerned. They discovered that there are two general planes of consciousness, the lower and the higher, understanding which fact enabled them to rise to higher plane and thus escaping the swing of the rhythm and manifested on the lower planes. In other words, the swing of the pendulum occurred on the unconscious plane and the consciousness was not affected. This they call the law of neutralization. It consists in the raising of the ego above the vibrations of the unconscious plane of mental activity so that the negative swing of the pendulum is not manifested in your consciousness and therefore not affected. It is akin to rising above the thing and letting it pass beneath you. The Hermetic master, advanced student, polarizes himself at the desired pole, and by a process akin to refusing to participate in the backward swing, or if you prefer, a denial of the influence over him, he stands firm in his polarized position and allows the mental pendulum to swing back along the unconscious plane. Allowing the individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery accomplish this, more or less unknowingly, and by refusing to allow their moods and negative mental states to affect them, they apply the law of neutralization. The master, however, carries this in a much higher degree of proficiency, and by the use of his will he attains a degree of poise and mental firmness about almost impossible of belief on the part of those who allow themselves to be swung backwards and forwards by the mental pendulum of moods and feelings. The importance of this will be appreciated by thinking persons who realizes what creatures of moods, feelings, and emotion the majority of people are, and how little mastery of themselves they manifest. If you will stop and consider a moment, you will realize how much these swings of rhythm have affected you in your life. How a period of enthusiasm has been invariably followed by an opposite feeling of depression. Likewise, your moods and periods of courage have been succeeded by equal moods of fear. So it has been with the majority of persons, tides and feelings who have ever risen and fallen with them, and they've never suspected the cause or the reason of the mental phenomenon. The understanding of the workings of principle will give one key to the mastery of these rhythmic swings of feeling, and will enable him to know himself and avoid being carried by these inflows and outflows. The will is superior to the conscious manifestations of this principle, although the principle itself can never be destroyed. It may escape its effects. The principle operates nevertheless. The pendulum ever swings, although we may never escape being carried along with it. There are other features of the operation of the principle of rhythm on which we wish to speak at this point. There comes as its operations, which is known as the law of compensation. One of the definitions or meanings of the word compensate is to counterbalance, which is in the sense in which Hermeticists use the term. It is the law of the compensation to which the Kybalion refers when it says the measure of the swing to the right and the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The law of compensation is that one swing in one direction determines the swing in the opposite direction or to the opposite pole, and one balances or counterbalances the other. On the physical plane, we see the examples of this law. The pendulum of the clock swings a certain distance to the right and then an equal distance to the left. The seasons balance each other in the same way. The tides follow the law, and the same law is manifested in all phenomena or rhythm. The pendulum with a short swing in one direction has short swing in the other, while the other long right invariably means to go long to the left. The object hurled upwards in a certain height has a distance to traverse one on its return. The force within a projectile sent upward a mile is reproduced when the projectile returns to Earth on its journey. The law is constant in the physical plane, and reference to the standard authorities will show you. But Hermeticists carry it still further. They teach that a man's mental states are subject to the same law. The man who enjoys keenly is a subject to keen suffering, while he feels but little pain and is capable of feeling but little joy. The pig who suffers is but little mentally and enjoys but little, he is compensated. And on the other hand, there are other animals who enjoy keenly, who are nervous organism and temperament cause them to suffer exquisite degrees of pain. So it is with man. There are temperaments which permit of but low degrees of enjoyment and equally low degrees of suffering, while there are others who permit most intense enjoyment but also the most intense suffering. The rule is of the capacity of pain and pleasure, and each individual are balanced. The law of compensation is in full operation here. But Hermeticists still go further into this matter, that they teach that before one is able to enjoy a certain degree of pleasure, he must have swung as far proportionally toward the other pole of feeling. They hold, however, that the negative is precedent in the positive in this matter, that it is in the experience of a certain degree of pleasure, it does not follow that he will pay up for it with a corresponding degree of pain. On the contrary, the pleasure of the rhythmic swing, according to the law of compensation for a degree of pain previously experienced either in the present life or previous connotation, this throws new light on the problem of pain. The Hermeticists regard the chain of our lives as continuous and the forming part of one life as an individual, so that the consequence of the rhythmic swing is understood this way. And why would it be without meaning unless the truth was in reincarnation is admitted? But the Hermeticists claim that the master or advanced student is able to a great degree to escape the swing toward by pain by the process of neutralization before mentioned. By rising to a higher plane of the ego, much of the experience that comes to the dwelling of the lower plane is avoided and escaped. The law of compensation plays an important part in the lives of men and women. It will be noticed that one generally pays the price of anything he possesses or lacks. If he has one thing, he lacks another. The balance is struck. No one can keep his penny and take a bit of cake. At the same time, everything has a pleasant and unpleasant side. The things that one gains are always paid by the things that one loses. The rich possess much than the poor lack, while the poor often possess things that are beyond the reach of the rich. The millionaire may have an inclination towards the feasting and the wealth wherewith to secure all dainties of luxury on the table, while he lacks the appetite to enjoy the same. He envies the appetite and digestion of the laborer who lacks the wealth and inclinations of the millionaire, who gets more pleasure from his plain food than the millionaire could have ever obtained from his appetite were not jaded, nor his digestion ruined, for he wants and habits and inclinations differ. So this is through life. The law of compensation is ever in operation, striving to balance and counterbalance, always succeeding in time, ever though several lives may require for the return of the swing of the pendulum.